The mahogany table stretched across the conference room like a polished battlefield. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Chicago skyline glinted in the morning light, towers of glass reflecting clouds that moved faster than anyone inside dared to. At the head of the table sat Richard Lane, a man once described by Forbes as the empire builder of Midwestern construction. His hair had gone gray at the edges, but his voice still carried that same iron-spined authority. Beside him lounged Ethan, his son, 30, loud, confident, the kind of man who believed the world owed him applause for merely existing. And across from them sat Claire Donovan, the corporate attorney assigned to rescue Lane Development Group from its spiral of lawsuits and debt. They didn't know she was Richard's daughter. "Ms. Donovan," Richard said, his tone clipped. "My people tell me you come highly recommended. Let's see if you live up to the billing." Claire met his eyes, those same cold gray eyes she'd once seen in the mirror every morning as a child. He didn't recognize her. That was fine. That was the point. "I'm not here for praise," she said evenly. "I'm here to keep your company from collapsing." Ethan smirked. "And you think you can do that? With a few fancy words and legal threats?" She didn't look at him. "With strategy and discipline," she said. "Two things your firm seems to have misplaced." Richard's brows rose, impressed despite himself. "Go on." She opened the folder in front of her. Inside were charts, numbers, lawsuits, and truths no one in that room wanted to confront. "You're facing 5 active lawsuits," she began. 3 for labor code violations, 1 for breach of contract, and 1 for negligence resulting in injury. If they all proceed to trial, the combined damages could exceed $52 million. Ethan laughed. "Lawyers love to scare people. We'll settle. Cheap." Claire didn't blink. "You've ignored settlement offers for 6 months. The court date is set. You'll be lucky to keep the lights on by next year." Richard leaned forward, elbows on the table. "And your solution? Complete internal audit, full compliance restructuring, terminate or retrain site managers, settle priority cases out of court, and freeze all new projects until your safety certification is renewed." "Freeze projects," Ethan barked. "That's suicide." "It's survival," Claire replied, tone steel calm. "You're bleeding from every side. My job is to stop the hemorrhage." Richard stared at her for a long moment. There was something in her voice, calm, deliberate, unyielding, that reminded him of someone from long ago. But he shook the thought away. That girl was gone. 24 years earlier, the rain fell hard against the tin roof of a small Illinois orphanage. Inside, a 6-year-old girl sat on the edge of a narrow bed, clutching a threadbare blanket to her chest. Her name was Claire Lane. Her father had brought her here that morning. He hadn't looked at her when he left. He'd just said, "This is for your own good. Someday you'll understand." But she did understand. She'd seen the way his face changed after her baby brother was born. The pride, the joy, the relief. She'd seen how her mother, exhausted and fragile, had stopped speaking at dinner. And she'd heard her father tell relatives, "At least now I've got a son to carry the Lane name." She'd been invisible ever since. The orphanage smelled like old books and cleaning supplies. The walls were painted a weary blue. Every night she fell asleep, listening to the distant sound of rain hitting the windows and wondering if he ever thought about her. He didn't. He built an empire instead, brick by brick, contract by contract, while Claire built herself from scraps. She studied harder than anyone. She read every book she could find. She learned that control was armor, knowledge was a weapon, and silence was safety. By 17, she'd earned a scholarship to Northwestern. By 26, she had graduated top of her class from Columbia Law. And by 30, she was one of the youngest partners at Silverman & Rowe, a firm known for cleaning up corporate disasters. She had a husband, Michael, kind and steady, and a daughter, Lily, with her mother's dark eyes. Every part of her life was deliberate, controlled, secure, until the day her firm received a new client request, Lane Development Group. When she saw the name, her pulse went still. And then, slowly, she smiled. Claire's first day at Lane Development was calculated down to the second. She arrived early, hair neatly pinned, navy suit flawless, heels silent on the polished floors. The receptionist greeted her nervously. "Mr. Lane is expecting you." She entered the boardroom and found Richard waiting, posture perfect, impatience radiating off him like heat. "You're late," he said, though she wasn't. "I'm on time," she replied. That earned a faint twitch of his mouth, somewhere between irritation and intrigue. Ethan strolled in minutes later, phone in hand, chewing gum. "Sorry, Pops, traffic." Richard's jaw tightened. "Sit." Claire sat too, opening her case file. She outlined the restructuring plan in meticulous detail, step by step. Ethan interrupted her every few sentences. She countered each objection calmly, professionally, and, when necessary, mercilessly. Finally, Richard lifted a hand. "Enough," he said. "Let her finish." When she did, he nodded slowly. "You sound like someone who's been preparing for this job her whole life." "I have," Claire said. He didn't know how true that was. That night, she went home, tucked Lily into bed, and stared out the window while the city glowed below. Michael came up behind her, resting his hands on her shoulders. "You sure about this?" he asked softly. "Working with them," she hesitated. "It's not about revenge. I just want to look him in the eye and know he'll never have that power again." Michael kissed her temple. "Then make sure he knows exactly who you've become." She smiled faintly. "Not yet." Within 2 weeks, the company began to change. She made unannounced visits to construction sites, reviewing safety logs and firing supervisors who falsified records. She renegotiated contracts, rewrote compliance manuals, and forced transparency meetings that made executives squirm. Employees started whispering her name in the halls, not with fear, but with something close to respect. Richard noticed. He'd sit in meetings, pretending to read reports, but really, he was watching her. The way she spoke, the way she carried herself. She reminded him of his wife, Margaret, who had died a decade ago, sharp, capable, and unafraid of him. "You remind me of someone," he said one afternoon. "Maybe someone you should have listened to," she replied, not looking up from her notes. He laughed once, short and surprised. "You've got some bite. Comes with the job." Ethan rolled his eyes. "She thinks she's running the place." "She's saving it," Richard said quietly. Ethan went silent. That night, Claire sat at her kitchen table, staring at her laptop. The old orphanage file was open on the screen, the scanned copy of her intake form, the signature at the bottom. Richard Lane. Her father's name. She whispered it under her breath, like testing a wound to see if it still hurt. It did. The first plaintiff was a drywall subcontractor named Luis Ortega, a man with calloused hands and a calm, measured stare. He had fallen from a second-story scaffold because someone had removed the cross-bracing to save time. The incident report was a masterpiece of passive voice. Procedures may not have been followed. The worker perhaps failed to secure harness until Claire produced the deleted inspection photos IT recovered from a foreman's phone. She laid the photos in a neat row across the conference table. Missing bolts, frayed lanyard, the date stamp. Ethan blanched. Richard's face went hard. "We're offering a public apology, back pay to his crew, lifetime medical coverage tied to a third-party administrator, and a safety scholarship fund in his name," Claire said. "If we fight this in court, you'll lose more than money." Richard studied the photos for a long beat. "Do it." "Don't be ridiculous," Ethan snapped. "You'll invite a feeding frenzy." "You've been feeding the sharks by bleeding in the water," Claire replied. "This is how you get to shore." Later in mediation, Ortega listened without theatrics, flanked by his attorney and his wife. When Richard apologized, no qualifiers, no if anyone was offended, the room changed. The settlement number was large. The non-monetary terms were larger. After they signed, Ortega stood, shook Claire's hand, and said, "You're the first suit in a while who looked me in the eye." Claire kept her voice even. "You deserved that on day one." Outside the building, winter light made a pale coin of the sun. Richard lingered on the sidewalk, hands buried in his coat pockets, breath coming in visible threads. "You pushed me," he said. "I pushed you into the truth," she answered. "Gravity did the rest." He nodded once. "You know, when I was younger, I thought leadership meant never bending. Lately, it feels like it means bending toward the right thing, quickly." Claire almost smiled. "Look at you," she thought, learning verbs. Aloud, she said, "We have 3 more cases this month. Then the class action." He exhaled, fog disappearing into the air like regret. "Let's keep moving." That night, with Lily tucked into bed and Michael grading essays at the dining table, Claire stood at the window, palms flat on cool glass. The old ache pressed behind her ribs, the picture of a little girl on a narrow bed listening to rain. Michael came beside her. "How's the weather in there?" "Clearing," she said, and surprised herself by meaning it. He slipped his hand into hers. "Storms don't last. People do." She leaned her head against his shoulder and watched the city pulse. The special meeting occupied a downtown hotel ballroom that smelled faintly of coffee and carpet cleaner. Investors in tailored coats sat beside superintendents in work boots. The collision of money and mud gave the air a crackle all its own. Claire took the stage with a deck that didn't flatter. Current liabilities, OSHA posture, mediation roadmap. She gave dates, not adjectives. She spoke in the grammar of consequence. A man with a ski lift tan raised his hand. "What assurance do we have that this isn't just window dressing?" "None," Claire said plainly. A ripple moved across the room. Surprise, then attention. "Window dressing is fast. This is slow. We're replacing windows." Another asked, "If we freeze new projects, won't we strangle cash flow?" "If you don't stop the leaks, it won't matter how much you pour in," she replied. "This is triage, later growth, in that order." An employee in a worn denim jacket stood. "My guys think this is just another speech. Are you really going to fix bathrooms and pay overtime?" "Yes," Claire said. "We've already started. Tomorrow morning, you'll get a memo with dates and vendors. If it doesn't happen, you call me. My number will be at the bottom." She paused. In ink. Murmurs. Some skeptical. Some relieved. When questions finally tapered off, Richard approached the mic. His throat worked before sound came. "We built fast and broke promises," he said. "We're going to reverse that. Ms. Donovan has my full authority." Ethan's jaw clenched. Claire watched him from the corner of her eye. The smirk was still there, but the scaffolding under it had cracks. Afterward, in a lemon-scented corridor, Ethan stepped into her path. "You made us look weak," he hissed. "Accountability only looks like weakness to people who've never tried it," she said. "What's your angle?" he demanded. "Press, book, politics?" "My angle is hands with all their fingers," she said softly. "Go home and count yours." He flinched, covered it with a scoff, and walked away too quickly. Claire exhaled. Her phone buzzed. A photo from Michael. Lily, face smeared with yogurt, grinning with all the defiance of a toddler who had discovered sugar. Under it, "We saved you a spoon." Claire smiled. Saved, she thought. The verb she could live inside. The independent safety audit took 10 days and 3 unannounced weekend visits. 2 auditors, one with a limp from a teenage lathe accident, walked through sites with clipboards and the flat stare of people who had neither time nor taste for performance. Their report, when it arrived, read like a verdict and a reprieve. High-risk hazards addressed, corrective actions implemented and verified, worker participation observed, culture shift nascent, but real. OSHA paused escalation. Lenders extended covenants with teeth. Claire brought the report to Richard's office and placed it on his desk. He glanced at the header, then at her. "You did this," he said. "You signed it," she replied. He picked up a pen, rolling it between his fingers. It clicked twice, a tiny metronome. "You know, when my wife died," he said, eyes unfocused, "the quiet in the house was loud. I filled it with work, and with my son. I told myself that was noble." He swallowed. It was convenient. The room held its breath. Claire didn't move. "Sometimes," he said, "I see you and think of her." "Not sorry," he stopped, recalibrated. "You remind me that the right voice can cut through the noise." Claire kept her face neutral. Inside, that 6-year-old sat up straighter. "Keep listening then," she said. "We're not done." He nodded and looked down at the audit again. "No," he said, quieter. "We're finally beginning." In the elevator, Claire reread the final page. Observed. Supervisor inviting crew to halt work over safety concern. No retaliation noted. A tiny line. A new habit forming in the bones of a company. She texted the sentence to Michael. He responded with a voice message of Lily yelling, "Again!" and a picture book about trucks. Some days, the world fit. That night, after Lily's bath and a negotiation over pajamas that would have made the UN proud, Claire sat with an old shoebox at the kitchen table. Inside, Aunt Rita's postcards, a ribbon from a county fair spelling baking, second prize, and a single photograph of a woman Claire barely remembered. Margaret Lane, hair caught in a breeze, eyes like winter sunlight. Claire turned the photo over. Rita had written in pencil, "She loved you. Don't mistake silence for truth." Claire's throat tightened. She'd spent years building a fortress around that sentence, keeping out the weather of wondering. She pulled a blank card from a drawer. "Margaret," she wrote, "because Mom was a chord too bright to play. They said you left, but I think the leaving began long before you were gone. I want to believe you looked back. I want to believe you wanted to take me with you. I'm a mother now. I know the shape of wanting. It has weight." She stopped. The clock hummed. Michael grated in the other room, his pen whispering across paper like rain. "We're okay," she wrote. "You didn't get to see that." "But we are." She folded the card and slid it into the shoebox with the ribbon. Some letters she'd learned were architecture for the heart, structures built not to be mailed, but to make the writer inhabitable. When she looked up, Michael stood in the doorway, soft-eyed. "You don't have to tell me," he said. "I wanted to," she replied, and told him everything. The photo, the pencil scrawl, the ache that felt like a remembered song. When she finished, he came behind her and wrapped his arms around her shoulders, chin in her hair. "You're building a life your younger self could live in," he murmured. "That's the work." Claire closed her eyes. For a moment, the past felt less like a trap and more like a trail she had walked far enough to see the view. By month's end, Claire had renegotiated 14 vendor contracts. The new language was a fist in prose, milestone-based payments, clawbacks for falsified reports, mandatory third-party safety trainings, site-level stop-work authority written in letters large enough to see from a scaffold. She presented the packet to the executive team. "These are non-negotiable," she said. "Sign by Friday." Blake Sutter, the COO, flipped through the pages with theatrical concern. "This is aggressive." "Effective," Claire corrected. Ethan tossed his copy on the table. "You're strangling us." "I'm teaching you to breathe without a ventilator," she said. Richard slid a pen from his pocket. "I'll sign now." Across the room, Sierra, the PR fiancée, raised a manicured hand. "Before we lock in the language, we should develop a messaging plan that—" "Message this," Claire said. "We're done hurting people to make numbers look pretty." Sierra's jaw set. "You're not in charge of narrative." "I'm in charge of the facts," Claire said. "The narrative can do what it likes as long as it doesn't lie." After the meeting, Richard caught up with her at the elevator. "You're fearless," he said. "I'm practiced," she answered. Fear and practice look the same from far away. He studied her face, something like recognition flickering and failing. Have we? He stopped, shook his head, half smiled at himself. "Never mind." She pressed the button. "We have a board briefing. Tuesday," she said. "Bring your pen." The elevator doors opened. He didn't step in. "Thank you," he said quietly, as if the word had been waiting a long time for air. Claire nodded and descended. Tuesday dawned sharp and blue, the kind of Midwestern winter sky that felt like glass you could hold without cutting yourself. Claire wore charcoal, hair up, wedding band warm against her skin. She placed the final packet on the boardroom table. Settlements executed, audit satisfied, compliance protocols installed, contracts rewritten, cash flow stabilized. "Before we begin," Richard said, surprising her by asking Sierra and Ethan to wait outside, "there's something I want to say, without an audience." He took the seat across from Claire and rested his hands on the table, palms down, as if to show he was not holding anything sharp. "When you speak," he said slowly, "I hear, God, this is going to sound sentimental. I hear my late wife in the way you refuse the easy thing. She used to put her finger on a blueprint and say, 'Right there is where it breaks, if you get lazy.'" He glanced at the window. "I haven't listened to a voice like that in a long time." Claire's heartbeat pressed against her throat. She could hear Aunt Rita. People do what they can and call it what they must. She could hear rain on a tin roof. She stood, not in anger, not to loom, but because her body needed the vertical line that says, "I know where I end and you begin." "My name before Donovan was Lane," she said. "Claire Margaret Lane." The room inhaled. Richard did not. His face went slack, then flooded with color, then drained again as if the blood in him had lost its map. He opened his mouth. No sound arrived. "You signed a temporary care agreement when I was 6, Claire said, voice steady. "You told yourself a story about what was practical. Aunt Rita raised me. She taught me to braid my hair and balance my checkbook and pick my battles. She did your work." Richard's hands curled on the table. He swallowed, twice. When he spoke, the words came graveled. Claire. She lifted a palm, no more than a few inches, drawing a boundary around her own ribs. I didn't take this job to punish you, she said. I took it because I'm good at ending harm. Your company was doing harm. This, today, had to happen with or without knowing who I am. His eyes shone and he looked away as if ashamed to let her see. His throat worked. I don't have a defense you haven't already dismantled. I'm not a prosecutor here, she said. I'm a builder. He nodded, almost like a bow. Do I get to ask for... You get to change, she said. When no one's watching, when it costs you. He exhaled, a sound like something old leaving a house. Then let me start where I should have started a long time ago. He pulled the packet toward him and signed on every tab without asking a question. Outside the door, someone laughed too loudly, Ethan probably filling space with noise. Inside, time held still, while a small, crucial architecture completed itself. When he finished signing, Richard looked up. He didn't reach for her. He didn't try her name again. He just said, "Thank you for saving what could be saved." Claire slid the documents into her folder. "Save the rest yourself," she said, and opened the door. News never stays put. A whisper sprang a leak. A rumor found a mouth. Within a week, a junior accountant knew what the boardroom had held, and within 2, a foreman in Joliet was telling a crane operator in Evanston that the boss's fixer was the boss's daughter he'd left behind. Claire ignored it. She declined interviews. She wrote memos. She walked sites. She listened. In the field, a carpenter with gray at his temples stopped her by a stack of lumber. "Ma'am," he said, "I got a kid who won't talk to me. I earned that distance. I don't want to keep it. I heard." He didn't finish. Claire held his gaze. "Start where you are," she said. "Not where you wish you were. Tell him the truth, then keep telling it with your feet." He nodded, eyes wet in the cold air. "Thank you." At HQ, Ethan hovered in doorways and then retreated, a moth undecided about the lamp. Finally, he asked for 5 minutes. He came in defensive and left quiet. "I didn't know," he said, voice thready. "About you, about any of it." "I'm not angry at you for what you didn't know," Claire said, "but I'm watching what you do now that you do." He swallowed. "What should I—" "Go walk a site," she said. "Without your PR coat. Ask someone where the nearest working bathroom is. Then make sure the answer isn't 2 blocks away." He nodded. She didn't smile. He went. Richard, for his part, stopped saying big things and started doing small ones. He showed up at pre-shift huddles without cameras and asked supervisors to read the stop work policy out loud. He signed back paychecks with a pen that had once only autographed steel beams. He asked HR for attrition stats and didn't fire anyone for telling him the truth. One afternoon, he emailed Claire a photo, a stack of envelopes addressed to field staff, each containing overtime differences owed with interest. On a sticky note he'd written, "Late is not never." She wrote back one word, "More." On a Sunday bright enough to feel borrowed, Michael drove them to a park on the lake where the wind could push the past out of your lungs. Lily tottered after gulls and shouted, "Mine!" at the horizon. Claire laughed and let the sound own her. They sat on a bench with coffee hot enough to argue with the cold. Michael nudged her boot with his. "How's your heart?" "Not quiet," she said, "but organized." He smiled. "Spoken like a lawyer. Spoken like a woman who used to think closure was a gavel," she said. "Turns out it's a checklist." They watched a barge slide by, black and patient. A dandelion, confused by the weird winter, poked a stubborn yellow through a crack near the path. Lily pointed. "Sun!" "Close enough," Claire said and kissed the top of her wool hat. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Thank you for the apology you made me say out loud." It wasn't signed, but she knew the cadence. She didn't reply. Some acknowledgments are complete without echoes. She tucked the phone away and threaded her arm through Michael's. "Let's go home," she said. "I've got a memo to write that will make someone curse me on Tuesday and thank me in 6 months." "That's my girl," he said. She smiled. "No," she thought. "I'm my own." By spring, the posters in every break room read, "We keep what we repair." Maya in compliance wrote it. Claire insisted it be printed in both English and Spanish, laminated, and bolted to the wall like a fixture. The class action settled without spectacle. The PR team tried to spin it as redemption. Claire killed the word in every draft. "We are not redeemed by press releases," she wrote in the margin. "We are redeemed, if at all, by paychecks that add up and ladders that don't slip." A small envelope arrived at Claire's apartment with no return address. A photograph of a woman in a blue dress on a summer lawn, hair caught mid-laugh. On the back, in Rita's tidy hand from years ago, someone had written, "She wanted skies for you." Claire slid the photo into the shoebox and closed the lid gently, like a door you intend to open again when your hands are clean. When the next company called, whispering its confession through a portal, Claire accepted, not to reenact an old wound, but because the muscle of truth felt good when it worked. She put on the suit that fit like resolve, kissed Lily's cheek, told Michael to text her photos of breakfast chaos, and stepped into a world that needed fewer speeches and more bolts tightened. On the way out, she saw a dandelion forcing its son through a crack by the curb. She didn't step on it. Some things, once they insist, you let them.